So I was up late the other night writing a script and needed a break. So I decided to put on a little Netflix. And of course, Netflix already knows what you like. And they're like, want to watch this crime documentary? And I'm like, I'm in. This is the true crime story of a bodybuilding female known as Killer Sally. But wait, Halloween is just around the corner, so you're probably going to be in the mood for some scary stuff, and that's what we do here. So just in case you don't forget, go ahead and subscribe right now, because I'm grinding hard to bring out 2 new stories per week to chill you to the bone. And go ahead and hit that like button, because we're about to solve this crime. Sally Dempsey was born in Allenton, Pennsylvania. She's a bit of a tomboy and enjoyed the outdoors. She would grow up to become a strong female athlete, excelling in both swimming and cross-country running. It was rumored that her father was a raging alcoholic and would frequently abuse both her and her mother. Like so many Americans looking to change their lives, she decided to join the Marines, and she would serve 7 years in the Marine Corps. She also met her first husband, Anthony, but she would later claim that Anthony was abusive to her, and that was the reason why the relationship ended. While still in the Marine Corps, she fell in love with bodybuilding. She was quite good at it. She would compete in strength competitions and even won the U.S. Armed Services Physique Championship twice in the late 80s. This would lead her to meet her second husband, Ray McNeil, who was a fellow Marine and aspiring bodybuilder. She would describe the situation as lust at first sight. While stationed at Camp Pendleton, California, she would be demoted from her position as sergeant for having a poor behavioral record, citing violence, lashing out at others, and anger issues. Eventually, this would cause her to be kicked out of the Marines in 1990 for this behavior. But the military would keep a record of her poor behavior, and this would eventually be used against her. A friend of Ray's would claim that Ray was involved in the brutal beating of a patron while working at a nightclub as a bouncer. Sally and her defense team would paint Ray in the light as being a serial cheater and very abusive throughout the relationship. Sally said in an interview that Ray would go into these steroid-fueled rages and he would beat her and try and choke her unconscious. But this was the defense team's strategy to paint Ray in a certain light and direct the storyline to justify her actions leading up to the incident. However, prosecution in the trial had strong evidence against her. It started with her long history of violence inside the military. Also in 1990, she was arrested for having a firearm and breaking out the car windows of her first husband, Anthony. Another incident started with her son getting into a fight with another boy. And that boy's father was a local mailman who would end up slapping her son for the incident. And what was Sally's response? She showed up in the mailman's house and punched him in the face, for which she was arrested for again. She once beat one of Ray's supposed lovers that ended up getting her kicked out of bodybuilding for a year. One time she pulled a gun on her husband, which resulted her getting pepper sprayed by police. Another incident reports her dancing on a nightclub table. And when a bouncer came to pull her off that table, she ended up kicking him in the face repeatedly. Both Ray and Sally were aspiring to become professional bodybuilders and make a full-time living in the sport. Ray's physique was good enough to land him his pro card, and he was an up-and-comer in the sport. But in the world of bodybuilding, most athletes don't make any money unless they're at the top echelon. And bodybuilding requires you to spend hours and hours and hours a day at the gym, which makes having a regular job a little more difficult. Not to mention the excessive amount of money that they have to spend just to stay competitive in the sport. Things like specific and extensive diet, lots of supplements, and even steroid usage. Multiply this times 2 to take into account that Sally was also competing, made it extremely hard for them to even make the bills, so money was tight. Now, Ray had the better shot at competitive bodybuilding, so this left it on Sally to be the one to go out and work regular jobs to bring money back into the family. And when that income wasn't enough, she found something a little more lucrative. Sally figured out that some men were really attracted to muscular women like her, and they were willing to spend top dollar to spend some alone time with her. She describes meeting men from all walks of life, from Wall Street guys to garbage men. They would often meet at sketchy motels. Now, she claims that nothing sexual was ever involved in these encounters, but she was paid $300 per hour for these services, and she had a long client list. But just what were those services? Supposedly, these men enjoyed being dominated by a physically strong woman like her. So she would throw them around a bit, she would wrestle them, she would verbally abuse them, things of this nature. Use your imagination. Was Ray aware of the situation? Sally says yes. He was okay with the situation because it brought in a lot of money into the household. Plus, it allowed Ray to focus full time on his bodybuilding career. But irregardless, a level of tension and jealousy would manifest in one way or another. A friend of Ray's in an interview claimed that Ray, while still married to Sally, had met a new woman, and he was planning to leave Sally for that woman, which undoubtedly would have increased the tension in the household. Sally, on the other hand, claims quite the opposite. She was planning to leave Ray because she was tired of the cheating and the abuse, and she was going to take the kids and move back home to Pennsylvania where her mother lived. Now, possibly both of these factors were true. Now we're going to be describing the actual incident, but it's going to be according to Sally's testimony because she was the only living witness that was there to tell the tale. It's 1995, Valentine's Day. Sally was hoping to spend some time with her husband, but Ray was nowhere to be found. She later found out that he was actually at a local bar drinking with another woman. Now, tired of sitting at home, she decided to go out and confront them. She starts to get ready to go out. She's getting all dressed up. She starts to put on her makeup. But as she's doing so, Ray comes home heavily intoxicated. Ray, seeing that his wife is getting all dolled up, he starts to question her. He's like, "Where are you going? What are you doing?" The tensions start to heighten and it quickly turns into a fight. The questioning turns to screaming at each other, and then it gets physical. Police reports, according to Sally's statement, said that Ray was in another one of his roid rages. He slapped her, pushed her to the ground, and then began to choke her like he had done so many times before. She can't quite remember how, but she was able to break his grasp, and she fled into the bedroom. She goes to the closet and pulls out a sawed-off shotgun from the top shelf. In self-defense, she threatens Ray, "Don't come near me or I'll shoot." But Ray didn't listen. He didn't stop. He lunged towards her, and in a split-second decision, she fires a devastating shotgun blast into Ray. Again, she claims self-defense, but that did not stop her from firing a second shotgun round into Ray's jaw. With Ray still alive, on the floor, fighting for his life, she calls police. The police show up, they take her into custody, and begin the process of taking statements and interrogation. Ray would not survive the ordeal. Thinking it was in self-defense and justified, Sally would end up giving police a full confession and a detailed account for what had happened, but without getting a lawyer first, something she would later regret. Police, with this full confession and Sally's long history of violence, would end up charging her with first-degree murder. In the courtroom, Sally's defense strategy played heavily into painting a storyline that Ray was an adulterer, he was physically abusive, and he had an explosive temper, which made her generally fearful for her life. But the defense's evidence was uncorroborated and circumstantial. The storyline of an innocent woman fearing for her life might have held more weight, but this would end up being a hard sell. Sally could not hide her physical demeanor. She was imposing even to men. She had military training, but unlike the defense, prosecutor Daniel Goldstein had direct evidence. She had a long, violent record inside the military, a long arrest record, plus a full confession. Then there was this piece of key evidence. Sally had often met men in motels charging them for her to wrestle and dominate them, so a behavioral trait of dominating men. She claimed non-sexual, but who knows what a jury's going to believe. Now, around that same time, she met an amateur filmmaker, and they collaborated to make and sell VHS tapes of this behavior, wrestling and dominating men for their pleasure. It must have been relatively lucrative for her because it wasn't a one-time thing. There were a number of different tapes. The prosecution would use this to break down the defense's storyline of a woman fearful for her life, because you can literally see her beating up on men. But here's the kicker. In one of those VHS tapes, she plays off her real military background, depicts her doing physical military training, wearing camouflage, and even holding firearms. The cover of that VHS tape features her holding a shotgun. What's the name of the VHS tape? Killer Sally. And the shotgun that she's holding on the cover is the same weapon that she would later use to kill her husband, Ray McNeil. She ended up being convicted of that first-degree murder and was sentenced to 19 years to life. She served a total of 25 years in a California women's facility. She was released in 2020, and Netflix made a documentary about her. What's up, guys? Thanks for watching. My channel would be nothing without you, the viewer. So from the bottom of my heart, I just want to say thank you for real. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, because Halloween is almost here. I'm already working on the next video, and you don't want to miss out. Peace.